Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters. It's that show where we take a deep dive into all things mental health and well-being. I'm Dr. Audrey Tang. My co-host is Judith Crosier. Today's topic is understanding how to overcome obstacles. And we've got a great guest on the show today. It's Johnny Lawrence. It's a self-development coach. He has been through a lot in his own life. However, through processing, through understanding, through working through all of that, he has been able to turn that around and now coaches others to be able to do the same. Not only that, but he is writing a book and he has also done a number of quite phenomenal treks, and we are going to hear all about them after our little intro. Morning, Jude.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And today's topic is an interesting one for how we feel because it's about overcoming obstacles.
Brilliant.
So how are you feeling about general life and the little obstacles that we have to overcome?
What a good question. I think that's such a good question because sometimes it's easier to get over big obstacles.
Yes, I agree.
Because you can see them coming and you can maybe plan or you can stop and really deal with it. But little ones, maybe you just kind of go past them or get over them without really dealing with them. Maybe they then build up. I don't know. This is just...
it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think exactly when we say, how are you?
Yes.
And we might say, I'm fine or I'm good or whatever. I don't think we acknowledge the little obstacles. We might be thinking, if we're being honest, that we're fine, that, okay, the big obstacles are under control.
Yes.
But we might be ignoring the, I was running late, or I had to take my cat to the vet, or all of those other things which crop up and we don't realise. So obstacles can cover so many different things.
Well, exactly. I mean, a tiny little obstacle. I couldn't go out my front door this morning because it's a long story, but because it's a new front door with a new lock, I can't lift up the handle to lock it. So then I had to come back in and find the back door key so I could let myself out, then find the gate key. Who knows where the gate key is? So to let myself out that way. So hence, knock-on effect, I'm, late. And then that has a knock-on effect for everything else.
Yes.
So it's such a tiny thing. So
But also, those are little things that we live with.
Yeah.
So I will do things like that. I've had experiences like that where I've not been able to do something quite regularly. So you're talking about front door.
Yes.
And it's difficult, it gets stuck and so on. And I'll live with it. And it's amazing what you put up with.
Well, I have. But I haven't been in a situation where I've been on my own in the house to go out. So, my husband's not there for me to say, can you lock the door behind me? Yeah. So you're right. I have lived with it for 2-3 months now.
And
not anymore.
Yeah, this is the thing. Does it take us that moment of, I wouldn't say crisis, because it's not,
Not a crisis, but an annoyance.
Yes.
Yeah.
To suddenly go, I better do something about that.
Yeah, I think so.
That's so odd. What about big obstacles then? How do you manage those?
I suppose it depends on what it is, but some big obstacles you need to take time out to sort them out. So it might need talking about an issue with a colleague, for example, to iron something out, or it might be, to look at your finances, but it all takes time.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it also takes a little bit of, for me, certainly folding down the ego. Yeah, I can do it. This all by myself. And then thinking, oh, well, who can help? Or then the opposite of ego, but no one will want to help. And
that
you
can
have
happen.
to get over both. You have to just reach out. And if someone doesn't help, okay, they don't help. Doesn't mean you're not worth helping or
that's true.
Anything like, you just ask someone else. But we take it so personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways you might be similar to me. I tend to try and cope with everything myself, try and deal with everything myself. And it never occurs to me to say, oh, can you help me with this?
Yeah.
So then obstacles become bigger, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is what we're talking about today. And we have the fabulous, fabulous self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, joining us straight after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. And we have got the fabulous Johnny Lawrence, the self-development coach, zooming into the studio with us. Welcome to the show, Johnny.
Good morning. It's morning, isn't it? Yes. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I just we've got some tree work being done at our home, so I've just said, would you mind turning off your chainsaws this morning? And they were like, not at all. So we're doing all right. If you hear a loud noise, that's what it is.
Well, we're very, very touched with that. We were literally talking about, because the theme is overcoming obstacles, and we were literally talking about how sometimes it's the little obstacles that can be more problematic than the great big ones.
I find it's almost always that.
Well, perfect. Now, you yourself, however, you have built up a fabulous career. You are in great demand. You're a speaker. You're a real advocate for mental health. But it didn't start that way. So do you mind sharing your story with us, please?
Not at all. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It didn't start that way. And that's kind of what drives me the whole way through this journey, because it is difficult. It's difficult putting yourself out there and talking about difficult things. And, I've got support with that so that I can do that and be helpful. But overarching, I believe that when education meets experience, it creates wisdom. And, I've qualified as a certified behavioral change coach. I've done qualifications in counseling. And, being honest with you, I'm a geek when it comes to self-development and psychology. I love podcasts and paying money to go and listen to great speakers and just learning from people. I just love it. I love it all of that sort of thing. So that's my education. But my experience, unfortunately, comes from my childhood and some of the difficulties I faced when I was young. And I've recently been writing my book. Pleased to say that I actually think I might have finished yesterday, which is quite exciting.
Congratulations!
And that's been a journey within itself, to be honest. Who knew that writing the book would be part of the journey? I didn't. But I looked back a lot. I reflected, and I looked at my schooling, and I looked at the fact that I was born into poverty. My mother and father on that front did their best, but it was hard for them, and we didn't have a lot of money. Which meant at school, kids can be cruel. I was bullied quite a lot. I didn't have the right clothes. I didn't have anything really. And I was quite socially awkward as a kid. I was also dyslexic and was told a lot by teachers that I was stupid, which wasn't that helpful. But when you grow up in a family that hasn't got any money, obviously you can be quite thin, which meant I was never picked for sports either. So at school, I thought I was thick and I was never picked for sports. And that has a certain impact on the way that you look at the world. Out in the big wide world, I'm mixed race, and around that time when I was young, mixed race relationships were something which I think generated a lot of fear within people, mainly because it wasn't understood, it was different, it didn't conform, all of those things. And I remember incidences such as my mum standing in a post office queue and some older chap spitting in her face and calling her disgusting, and she had to stand in the post office queue with saliva running down her face, which obviously is something that you remember for the rest of your life. And as a young kid, you try to make sense of it. And my mum tried her best to explain it, but it was difficult for me to understand at that age. But I think the big thing for me was my home life. Unfortunately, I witnessed a considerable amount of domestic violence towards my siblings and my mother. I was also subjected to physical abuse and what I've come to understand as torture. I had some really quite unpleasant things done to me. Obviously, I'm downplaying it somewhat. I'm not sure what I can say here. But, there was a lot of really, really nasty things that happened that I've only really been able to come to terms with through a therapeutic journey. So when you look at it, didn't feel accepted at school, or didn't feel accepted in the wide world, and where I'm supposed to go home and feel safe, I wasn't safe there either. So you can imagine what kind of human being that creates. And it wasn't until my teenage years where I started to really identify that I was struggling to have relationships, hot and cold, very distrusting, very paranoid. And that wasn't great, if I'm honest. That wasn't very helpful when it came to making relationships. Later in life, I found there were 3 or 4 different stages in my life where I found a way to emotionally regulate. I'd have very strong, very powerful emotions that I didn't understand and scared me. And there was this thing that helped with that, and it was called alcohol. Now, I want to say that I'm not glorifying it or saying that it's the answer or anything like that. I'm saying that it was a solution to a problem for me.
Yeah.
And the truth about it is that it works until it doesn't. You know, it's not the solution, it's a solution. And that's how I find compassion for all of the ways that maybe I messed up, the things I regret, the things I wish hadn't happened when I was drinking, because I was just, well, kind of still am always that kid that's just trying to figure it out, you know. And I think, to be honest, there's a lot of that in everybody.
What support was missing for you at that time, if you can think back? What could have supported you?
I don't know if this qualifies as support, but what was missing for me was somebody to explain that my childhood wasn't a typical childhood. Okay. Because although that might seem obvious, when I'd go to other people's homes, I would become really confused. And actually a little bit scared. I didn't really understand, and you know, I would misinterpret some of the things that were going on. If the mum and dad of the house were having a friendly bicker, I would think World War III is about to break loose, you know, things like that. So it would have been lovely for somebody to explain to me that that wasn't a typical childhood. It would have been nice for somebody to explain to me that it wasn't my fault, because I think as children we are quite egocentric, and we look at the world through what does it mean to me, right? And I kept thinking, well, if I just do this, then he won't do this, and he won't hate me or he won't hurt me. But that obviously wasn't the case. And somebody to tell me that it will get better as I get older, and that I won't feel the way I do for the rest of my life, which is what it felt like. It felt like a life sentence of like pain. And just a safe place to have my anger as well, because I was, especially as a teenager, I was quite angry.
I mean, relating to all of the experiences that you've been through, one of the key things that you teach others is that actually you can't suppress the past, and that relates to also even when you were going through it before. It's not a case of suppressing. We actually have to process. We have to understand. We have to recognise what is our responsibility, what we have no responsibility for. How has that understanding been so central to your own healing process?
If I was to put it in a nutshell, I would say it was about seeking the truth. I'm a truth seeker at the end of the day. And, you know, I think a lot of people think that good mental health is about happiness and fulfillment and finding a purpose. And do you know what? Perhaps that's true for some people. Lucky them. but if I'm honest, I think that good mental health is about finding stability. It's about getting up in the morning and knowing that the floor beneath you is solid, and that when you touch it, it's not going to fall away, and that people are going to be there, and that jobs are going to be there, and that you're going to be able to have the things that are important to us each day. Stability. And nothing is more stable than the truth. Even if you don't like it, even if you don't like the truth, nothing is more stable than the truth, because it doesn't change. You can rely on it, even if you don't like it. And for me, it was about understanding my life through the eyes of truth, which meant looking at things and realizing that in perhaps some cases it was worse than I thought. And just knowing it's true, knowing it's never going to change, gives me that solid platform, that solid foundation to build a life upon. Before, there was nothing but instability. Therefore, you know, I whenever I felt like I gained traction, up popped my trauma and said, "Oh, think you're doing okay, do you?" let's see if we can play about with that. So yeah, for me, it's always about seeking truth and looking for what's true.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that is so powerful. And Johnny, you're staying with us. To our viewers, we're going to let you reflect on that for a moment. We'll be back just after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. We've got self-development coach Johnny Lawrence on with us. He is a speaker. He is a podcast host. He has just finished his book. He is an incredible inspiration, and we're delighted he's given us his time.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. You know how much I love speaking with you guys. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. So thinking about anger, you know, obviously you said you had feelings of anger and other feelings as well. So processing everything that's happened to you, that's a lot. And sometimes when we begin to process, then more feelings of anger come up. But with understanding comes anger sometimes. And you've run courses on understanding and validating anger.
That's right, yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I think for me, it's about taking a step back and saying, what is anger? Well, anger is an emotion. That's what it is. It's an emotion. And I have this belief that emotions are the way that our soul makes requests. You know, it's how our body communicates with us. It's how it tells us, hey, pay attention. This thing's happening that you should be focusing on. You know, emotions are messages in essence. And to be honest, they're never wrong. Now, what does that mean? You know, you're saying that when I'm angry, I'm never wrong. No, it's a bit like a calculator, right? You know, if you type in the wrong information, you get the wrong answer. You know, so it's about understanding, okay, well, have I made a mistake? Am I right to be angry? So it's not about saying, oh, I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't be angry. I can't be angry. I'm not allowed to be angry. It's my mum, it's my dad, it's my brother, it's my sister. And anger can feel really scary, but it's often very much confused with rage. Now, rage is different to anger. Rage is when anger becomes violent and out of control. And what that would suggest to me is that you've allowed that to become suppressed, that you've ignored it, that you've told yourself, you've gaslit yourself and said, no, I'm not angry. I'm not at all, as your leg taps frantically under the table. You know, I'm fine, no problem. I can't talk anymore. Let's go, you know. So anger is a reaction. And, you know, there's a debate on it, but in my opinion, many times I believe that anger is a secondary emotion to a primary. You know, you feel inadequate, you feel helpless, you feel scared, whichever it is, and you don't want to have those feelings because they're sensitive emotions. They're emotions about an event. So instead, I'm going to have an emotion about an emotion. I'm going to be angry because now I can swear and I can say stuff and I can throw stuff and I feel like I'm empowered. But actually, all I'm doing potentially is making the situation worse. So the course is about validating the anger because I have these 4 stages of behavioral change where I talk about the first one being awareness. You know, you cannot change what you're not aware of. If you're not aware of it, then you don't stand a chance. It's just going to be this emotional trigger that dominates your life whenever you feel it. And that could, like I said, it could be inadequacy. You know, you have this this feeling of inadequacy that was installed in you as a kid, and now every time you feel inadequacy, you don't want to feel it, so you have anger instead, and that's how you become emotionally triggered. So it's about identifying it, validating it, looking into it. One of my favorite quotes is, the freedom that you are looking for is found in the thing that you are avoiding.
That is true.
Wow,
I sort of love that quote, sort of hate it.
Yes.
I hate it because it's true. That's why, you know, but it is true. And it's been something that's come up for me a lot whilst writing my book. It's like, you know, Johnny, you're tidying the kitchen. Johnny, you're hoovering the living room. You're not writing your book. You're avoiding it.
Yes. It really is. I mean, when you talk about your methods of behaviour change, when you talk about having a cause, people come there and they want to be there. They've probably realised, they've had that awareness that there's something they want to deal with. But when we're starting, just at that moment of knowing we're really almost at rock bottom, or we're so frustrated or angry or whatever we're experiencing, it can feel really difficult to even take that first step to say, I need help, or you don't know who to reach out to. Do you have any tips or tools for that person in that space, in that energy where they know something needs to change, but they just don't know how?
Ask for help. First and foremost, ask for help. Don't allow your thoughts to be the thing that sort of drives your behavior, because sometimes it's not that they can't be trusted, it's that they, again, like the calculator, they might have been given the wrong information, or you might have interpreted the wrong information. But ultimately, again, I come back to the same thing: discover what is true. Discover what is true. Identify the emotional triggers that create the unwanted behavior. Learn emotional regulation, practice emotional regulation, discover your core values, challenge your limiting beliefs, set some goals, and be aware that the goals will change and that just because you've made a decision, life might not agree.
Yes.
Fall in love with what motivates you, you know, and most importantly, once you've done those things, set your environment up to support you.
Yes.
Set your environment up to support you, because if you are in an environment that's always cueing you back to your old behavior, you will blame yourself and you will feel like you failed when actually you haven't. You just skipped a bit.
Yeah, actually, I know you've got a question, but this one really relates to what you've just said, Johnny. So I wanted to ask about that. Sometimes we need familiarity. When you're going through that process of change, you want to come back to something that you understand and you know. But of course, we know that that environment may not be healthy for us, exactly as you've just said. So again, how do we manage that when you almost want those people, but you know that they're not necessarily the healthiest people right now?
Yeah, I mean, people are part of your environment. And if you want to change, you have to kind of be willing to let go of what's holding you back. One of my favorite stories, I butcher it every time, but I'll give it a shot, it's a story that I call Plato's Cave. It's not called that, but it's a story about some prisoners chained up in a cave, and they can't turn their heads, and all they can see is the wall in front of them, and there's a fire behind them that flickers their reflections on the wall. There's food available, there's water available, that's all they've ever known, but they're chained to the wall. And then one day Plato escapes, and he goes past the fire and he finds an opening and he sees the rest of the world. And he can't believe what he's seeing. He can see sky, trees, rivers, all sorts of things. And he's excited, right? He's really excited. So he runs back in the cave, tells everybody what he's seen, and they're terrified because they haven't seen what he's seen. They haven't experienced what he's experienced. And all that he's doing is scaring them. So as a choice in that moment, do I go outside of the cave knowing that outside is real, but leaving everybody I love? Or do I go inside the cave again with everybody I love, pretending that it's real when it's not? And that can be what it's like when we develop ourselves. We change. And there are many phases to it. Sometimes we can get a little bit evangelical and be like, hey, you should do this thing that I'm doing because it's really good and it's really working. It's like, okay, guys, it's time to go now. But that can be annoying. But at the end of the day, not all of your relationships will make it. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to end. It just means that they might have to change a little bit, but you have to let them do that. You can't keep holding on. There's nothing more painful than trying to hold on to something that wants to go, you know? So yeah, that story sort of, I hope, encapsulates and answers the question in some way.
That story's brilliant. It's a really good analogy, and I can just picture it. So that's sort of somebody taking the first step into understanding themselves, maybe, or wanting to change things. And what happens when someone has taken that first step and is on the kind of the route to finding out the truth and processing the change and wanting to make that change. If they get stuck, I think it's easy to then beat yourself up and think, oh, you know, it's not working. But how do you remain compassionate to yourself and keep going? And what do you do when you hit those obstacles, I guess?
I think when people feel stuck, something's changed that they're not acknowledging or don't want to acknowledge or can't, you know, in some way. And I think, first and foremost, in that situation, I think very often people overlook the option of just taking a break. You know, developing yourself and moving forward is quite draining. And sometimes you just need to take a break and you just need to take a step back, which feels really counterintuitive. Feels like you're not doing anything and, you know, it's not moving towards anything. You don't have to always move towards something. Sometimes you can just take a break and chill.
Yeah, sounds simple, but actually probably very effective, just to take a breather.
Yeah, I mean, my wife laughs at me because when I take a break, she's like, I've never seen anyone make chilling look so bloody difficult. It's like, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I think something has changed and you're not acknowledging it. I think often that's how we feel stuck. Maybe it's something we don't want to be true. Maybe it's something that overwhelms us. Maybe it's something that causes us to feel scared, so we avoid it. But very often, I think when we feel that stuck feeling, it's life is nudging you to change and you don't want to, or you can't, or something like that's happening, I would imagine. But again, it would be complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very complex answer, and obviously you run courses on this. You're a coach, you're a behavioural coach. But I think that's a really important point there, because it relates to that feeling of wanting to run back to familiarity.
Yes.
If we can actually just take a break, that really helps. We are keeping Johnny because his work is really transformational, and we will be talking about transformation right after this.
Hi, it's Mark from Life Stories with Mark Hoberman. My show airs on E360 TV Fresh Takes Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. EST. You can also see my other show, Lighting the Educational Flame, which also airs on E360 TV Fresh Takes Monday nights at 9 p.m. EST. Can't wait to see you there.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. It's a thrill to have the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, staying with us. We are talking about overcoming obstacles. And I know, Johnny, in your work, you offer excellent tips and tools, but of course you're very mindful about not being that evangelical person and going, yeah, you must do this. Why is that not giving advice or not giving that prescription so important when it comes to supporting someone on a healing journey?
I like to believe I offer perspective. I try not to give advice unless it's to my kids, and then it's more like, do this, please.
That's different. That's allowed.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. But I think when you offer someone advice, you're drawing from your own core values, your own beliefs, your own fears, your own needs, your own experiences. So my question would be, how does that help somebody else?
Yes.
Because they have all of their own of those things. And what you have to allow people to do is explore their core values. Have they changed? Explore their limiting beliefs and belief systems. Are they holding them back? What are you scared of? What do you need? What experiences have you had that have informed the way that you're thinking now? And ultimately, the big question is, why should somebody else live with the consequences of your decisions? Because you get to go along and fix someone's life and then walk off, and then they're the ones that have got to have the consequences, and they're sat confused, not understanding, well, it's worked for him, why hasn't it worked for me, Yeah. So for me, it's about allowing someone to spiral towards a solution. And it might look frantic, and it might look a bit sort of, not perfect, not linear. There might be some swearing. There might be all sorts of things. Yeah, that's okay, man. We're connected with something. But it's about giving someone the room. I wholeheartedly believe that every person that comes to me with the problem also comes with the solution, but something is standing in the way. And my job, as I see it, if I'm asked, is to hold that space for them and create something, put all the bags down, put all the weight down so that they can just stop for a minute and think and explore and be curious and try and work out the problem for themselves. Because at the end of the day, they're the only ones that have the answer.
That is so powerful and so important, and every coach needs to hear that. Every counsellor needs to hear that as well, because it really isn't about that, giving advice. It is about, exactly as you say, Johnny, it's giving that perspective, but holding that space for someone to explore and find what they need to find. Now, we talk about applying resilience, but I want to go not just into personal, but into things which can really push us physically, because I know that you have done some phenomenal treks, climbs, real physical feats of endurance. Now, please tell me how all of that resilience, that work that you've done in yourself, how that all came together at the top of a mountain.
You wouldn't believe this, but I'm actually doing it again. No! I don't know what's wrong with me.
I love it. I
don't know what's wrong with me. I really don't. But when I've climbed the two biggest peaks I have, I've got altitude sickness both times. Altitude sickness is awful. It's the worst thing I've ever felt. It's the worst I've ever felt. It felt like my body was attacking me. I couldn't tell the difference between a headache and a stomachache. It was awful. But the whole way up that mountain, I was having this internal battle with myself. Like, am I going to get to the top? Aren't I? What's going on? I didn't have any answers. I was just completely overwhelmed and anxious, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other. And then I got to a part of the mountain where I had to stop. And I realized something. I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision. I had to decide, look, am I doing this or aren't I? And it was in that moment that I made a decision, okay, I'm going to go to the top, that I then was able to accept it. Do you know what? Change is hard. Change is really hard. And actually, quite a lot of the time, we spend a lot of our time trying to find the easy way forward, the way to make it easier, when actually what we should be doing is accepting that it's difficult. And that's how it should be. Like, it's supposed to be difficult, otherwise everyone would be at the top of the mountain, right?
Yes.
You know, so I'm climbing this mountain, and all of a sudden I've decided I'm going to the top. I'm going to the top. And yes, it was 3 steps and stop, 3 steps and stop, and I was in a lot of pain. But there's this very, very out of context, it would look a bit strange. There's this strange photo of me, and I remember feeling in a horrendous amount of pain, but I've got this big smile on my face. Oh. It's the most surreal picture ever. But what that indicates is that, to me, that was living. Like, it was hard. I did want to give up, but I wasn't doing that. I was going to the top, and I knew I was going to make it. And when I got to the top, I had probably the most overwhelming emotional release I've ever had in my life.
Oh, wow.
I sat on a rock overlooking the Sahara Desert, just crying. And if I'm honest, it was because in that moment, I connected with every part of myself that I'd been lying to and ignoring, because I was vulnerable. Because the thing about a mountain is, are you cold? Are you scared? Are you hungry? Are you tired? I don't care. You know, that's a mountain. It doesn't care how you feel. It's not going to change for you. You have to change for it, and you have to go to the top or not. It doesn't care if you get to the top. Doesn't care if you get to the bottom. Doesn't care if you're cold, hungry. Yeah. It is what it is. You know, do it, don't do it. You know, so you realize in that moment that you make decisions, that life won't always support you, and that suffering is actually become one of my values, because suffering has given me so much in my life, unfortunately, that I have to sort of adopt it as a value and say, okay, fine. And what that means is, when I find myself suffering, it's not that I go looking for it, believe me, I don't. But when I do find suffering, I realize, okay, unfortunately, there's something to be learned here, I'm sure. So let's lean in instead of moving away from it.
So that illustrates perfectly your picturing you going up the mountain. That illustrates that overcoming obstacles, you have to employ, you know, physical ways of going past it, of thriving, not just overcoming emotional baggage. So why is that really important? Why do you apply that to overcoming other types of obstacles?
I mean, I think we live in a world where so many people are struggling for so many different reasons, and we're often told, sort it out, you know, you know, get on with it, you know. But who's out there showing you how? Yes. Who's out there showing you how? Everybody's. It's like my son said it to me a little while back. He said, "Dad, they're always telling me to concentrate at school, but how do you do it?" And he stumped me. I was like,
"It's
a really good question."
Yeah.
I was just like, I actually didn't know what to say, you know. So human beings organize their mind through conversation. So a good start would be to talk to somebody, and not necessarily to get their opinion or to get their views or to see their reactions. It's more about hearing yourself say things, because when you hear yourself say things, it has it lands differently. And it's only then when you hear it do you really know it. You know, how many times have you had a conversation with someone, you've said something and you've gone, oh, I actually didn't know I felt like that, you know? It's important, you know, and that's why we mustn't interrupt people. We must let them play out, no matter where it's going. And if they're talking trash about somebody, or they're being a bit negative, just let it play out. See where it goes, you know? If it goes too far, maybe reel it in. But but generally, I think, you know, you can't get it wrong, is what I'm trying to say. When somebody's having a quote unquote rant, let them rant. Yeah. Let them rant, because that's what's on their mind. That's their problem, and it's also part of their solution, most likely.
Okay, yeah. No, that's amazing. It all makes perfect sense, especially letting someone talk about their problems, because quite often they'll arrive at the solution themselves, like you say. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a lovely experience listening to you. And where can we find out more about you?
I've just started a community called the Changing Rooms. And it's my offering low cost to try and give people who perhaps don't have the money for coaching somewhere where they can explore, where they can ask questions, where they're not going to be judged and not feel stupid, somewhere where I can offer education, somewhere where I can offer just a little bit of a safe space. And I love the name Changing Rooms came because it'd been suggested to me to start a community for a little while. And I was trying to think of a name, and I was sat outside the changing rooms while my wife was changing, and I was like, isn't it interesting how we're in this massive department store, but yet my wife is quite happy to be as vulnerable as you can be in this little room. She's probably got no clothes on at all, and she's trying things on. And I was like, I love that analogy. I love that analogy, that she's found this vulnerable space in this department store where there's hundreds of people, and she's getting as vulnerable as she can, and she's trying things on. I was like, I'm going to call it the changing rooms. So that's launching hopefully next month. It's good. Like I said, I don't know the cost yet, but I'm trying my hardest to make it as low as possible. It's not to make money. It's about supporting people in the best way I can, you know, and that's what I'm always about. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Oh my goodness. That's just, I love that. That's absolutely brilliant. As always, Johnny, it's been such a pleasure. Please join us on the show again.
Oh, I'd love that. That'd be great. You know me, I love having chats with you guys.
Brilliant. We'll hold you to that. We will go over to Business Boost.
In today's Business Boost, I thought I'd pick up on something that our guest Johnny Lawrence was saying about values. A lot of the time, we may think we know what our values are, but actually, when it comes to knowing them and understanding them in practice, it's a little bit different. So what I want you to do when you think about your values, first of all, yes, write them down. Don't have too many. Stick to maybe 3 key values and really think about them. But now what I'd like you to do is to think about what they look like in practice. So let's use the value of kindness, for example. A lot of people may think, well, kindness, that's about opening a door for someone, or that's about donating money, or that's about, well, it can be all kinds of things. But for someone else, kindness may be not saying I told you so when I knew I was right all along. So you need to think about what that value actually looks like to you. Because then you may begin to recognize that other people share those values, but they just present in different ways. And that already shows not only how we are all individuals, but also how we process things differently, and therefore we do need to hold space for other people, even if we're talking about the same thing. But the other reason I want you to think about your values in action is if you can understand what they look like, you could take yourself through the day and find opportunities to actually practice those values. Because as we say whenever I deliver business training, organizations have values, but if they're not actually living them every single day, well, what's the point? It just becomes that mission statement over the door. So think about what your values are, recognize what they are in action, and then take yourself through your day and think about, well, how can I apply that? If I believe in kindness, if I believe in loyalty, generosity, whatever those values are, how can I apply that throughout my day?
Great guest.
I know. And I've had the pleasure of having him on my radio show before, and I just adore Johnny. He's not only he's so accomplished, he's so incredible at what he does, but he's such a nice person with it.
He's so lovely. It's the first time I've met him, but he's very, very warm and easy to relate to.
Yeah, and it is all about holding that space. Yes. And, well, I think that's a good start, I guess, for our top tips to take away. What are you going to take away from today?
There's a couple of things. One is to understand what the obstacle is emotionally, but also physically.
Yes.
So, yes, you do have to unpack, the psychological stuff that's going on behind it. But then you also have to put in place physical or, actual ways of moving forward. So that's one. And then the other one is actually something I used to do and I don't now. So if a friend used to come to me for advice, I used to absolutely do what he's saying don't do, which is draw on your own experience only. But now I do the thing that he said to do, which is, so I would then question my friend back, and then let them come to their own decision, because it's not about what I would do. And even if I can think I can put myself in their situation, you can't, because you're not that person. So those are the two main things I
Yeah.
took away. How about you?
Yeah, no, gosh, absolutely. As for me, it is one of the key things that resonated was about holding space and letting people rant, because through that rant, they'll get their own solution. And it is true, because we get really uncomfortable with quite big emotions.
Yes.
We do want to smooth it all over. We do want to calm everything down. And actually, in allowing that to play out, that person will then suddenly go, because I know I do it. I get to the end of it and suddenly go, oh, no, that's what I need to do.
It all becomes clear.
Yes, because you've cleared that space.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the biggest one, I think. But there are so many tips and tools there. And if you have any favourites, please add them to the comments. But as we come to the end of another show, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for tuning in and have a healthy week.